as we see them. Ah, yes. And we're pretty excited, you guys. So just a little background. We're with the Rhone Rangers today. If you're not familiar with the Rhone Rangers is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to promoting American Rhone varietal wines, you guys. And who best to talk about Rhone wines other than our friends from Santa Barbara County? I am joined here with Dusty Nabor from Nabor Wines. I also have Stephen Searle from Jaffurs, if you're familiar with Jaffurs, and then none other than Mr. Larry Schaffer of Tercero Wines. And they're all part of the Rhone Rangers. I'm excited today. My name is Lamar Engel. I'm with a little company called the Wine Militia, and I love Rhone whites and reds. And that's why we're here. We're going to be talking about the lighter side of the Rhone varieties. And we're actually going to be talking about the red Rhones here, just the lighter side of it. And I thought it would be fitting today to chat a little bit about our friends in Santa Barbara County. And I thought it would be fitting to start with a quote here and just kind of hear what you guys think of this. And this is a quote by a very revered yet boisterous, rebellious history maker, the late Jim Clendenin, founder of Au Bon Clement. Although known for Burgundian style wines, he was definitely a character and a key holder for some of our friends that have worked with Rhone wines. And he said, in California, when people started celebrating sunshine and heaviness and alcohol and flatness and lack of food compatibility, they lost something in translation, what wine should be. And I think that's a great way to start talking about kind of the lighter side of reds. What do you guys think about that quote? And talk to me a little bit about your decision to play with kind of this lighter interpretation of what we love in our Rhone reds here. Dusty, why don't you start, man?
Okay. Yeah, it's totally true. I mean, I didn't really decide to start playing with lighter reds. You know, my kind of philosophy on winemaking and my style, if I have a style, is that I just do what the fruit wants done. And this particular Grenache that we get comes in a lighter style. And it's not that we, you know, try and make it light. We try to get every bit that we can out of it. But I'm not trying to make it something that it's not, you know. And when you talk about bigger red wines and more extraction, you know, by definition, there's more there. There's more flavor in bigger wines, but more in quantity is not really what you want in wine. And I think that that's what Jim was getting at. You know, just having more of something is not necessarily better. You know, we want in lighter wines, you can have more elegance. They require a little bit more attention. You know, they're just not so in your face. And you know, because of that, you know, they tend to do worse in like blind tastings. You know, if you line up 10 wines and you have a bunch of industry people there, I guarantee 9 times out of 10, the biggest wine wins the tasting. And that's just because, you know, there's too much for people, and the big wines stick out and they're like, oh, that one, wow, it was really in my face. But if you take a step back and you look at these wines in isolation, and you spend some time with them, an elegant wine that's complex, it takes a while for it to show itself, to present itself to you. And that, you know, that's what wine's about, you know. And I think it's really cool with lighter wines too, that you can serve them kind of chilled, and as they warm up, they offer something new. They offer something different at almost every temperature. There's something new, there's something different. Whereas, you know, if you chill a big fat cab down, you're going to get nothing until it warms back up. So, I mean, these wines have so many different personalities. And I think, again, going back to what Jim said, that's what it's all about. That's what you want a wine to be, you know, transcendent and speak to you. And in order to do that, you need to pay attention. And I think that these wines are really good examples of when you need to be on your game and look at them and say, okay, It's lighter. It's not so much in my face, but every time I go back to the glass, I'm getting something a little bit different. I get something a little bit, a different aroma or a different flavor, or now it's a little warmer, and now it's showing a little different. And I think, that journey is what is so cool, in wine.
Yeah, I agree, and I have to ask. Does anyone else believe that the density and the power does equate to value? I mean, have you seen that in your peer groups and in even customers that come in and taste wine? Is that a common misconception that you're also exposed to as well, from what Dusty's saying?
I think it certainly is, just from my experience. I mean, particularly, I would say less so on a professional level. I think the more experience people have with wines, the more able you are to appreciate the subtleties in wines. And as a younger wine drinker, or maybe just an average consumer, big, bold flavors really stand out. And so I know, and just from being in the tasting room at Jaffurs, it's really often that the Petite Syrah is everyone's favorite, because it's just such a bold wine. It's dark, and it's almost black in color, has tons of fruit. Love it. And that's okay. But I think that it takes the appreciation to enjoy kind of a lighter style, is something that maybe comes with a little more experience.
Yeah, I've noticed that experience does kind of play a big role, and we're, instead of talking about like the maturity of people's palates and things like that, I do think that there's an evolution that takes place. It's almost like, I don't want to say graduation, but I've seen people kind of start to slow down and really understand these lighter reds, which is kind of interesting topic. Larry, I know we've talked a lot in the past about kind of stylistically about kind of the lighter style of reds. What do you feel, and how do you feel about the place of these style of wines in a portfolio that you could speak to?
Well, I think the points both Stephen and Dusty made were awesome. And I guess one of the things, it's interesting, Grenache, for instance, is a prime example. There are so many people that believe Grenache does not make a complete wine on its own. And I've fought this battle for quite some time, where you need a little Syrah, you need something. Well, you don't. Grenache is a beautiful variety, but you need to switch your mindset in terms of how you perceive the wine. The challenge with lighter red wines is we require consumers to come to them a little bit more. They don't hit you in the face. They're not immediately accessible, because people's mindsets, when they think of red wine in general, it is darker is better. And I see that day in and day out, whether it's adding mega purple, which we're not going to get into, whatever it might be. Now, I have no problem with wider bodied, big shouldered red wines. There's a time and a place for it. I like to say that light red wines are second glass wines. They are the wines that after you have your first glass, you want a second glass. You want to have it throughout the meal. When you have a big, bold red wine, sometimes they're very taxing, and you really don't want a second glass. You want to move on to something else, because they've really filled you up and they've kind of overwhelmed your senses. So these wines do require a little bit more attention, and that is a challenge in and of itself. It requires a switch of a mindset. I don't think it's as much of an evolutionary process. We talk about people getting into wine and graduating to certain wines. I think it has a lot to do just with appreciation and slowing down. And I think that comes with age. It comes with interest. It comes with a lot of things. But some wines really require you to sit back a little bit and take them in, rather than them coming to you.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that being definitely something that's a valid point for sure. Just taking the time to allow the wine to kind of speak to you a little bit. I'd love to get into some wines that we have here tonight. I think we were gonna start, Larry. We were gonna start with the Cinsault.
Sure. That I think that makes the most sense. Is probably just start with mine, go with Dusty's, and then end with Stephen's. I think that makes sense based on tasting through these wines. So this is 100% Cinsault from Camp 4. One of the other things I wanted to mention about tonight is all three of these wines are from different AVAs throughout Santa Barbara County. You know, I was just up in Paso this weekend. I did a tasting at Atascadero, and it's really interesting because every winemaker up there wants to say their grapes are all from West Paso. West Paso. Now there's 13 AVAs, right, throughout Paso, but everyone yearns to say they're from West because West is cooler. We don't necessarily yearn up here because every AVA brings quality to the table. It just brings a different signature. And that's one of the beautiful things about where we make wine. I mean, all of these varieties can be grown. Now, I don't think Cinsault is grown at this point in the Santa Rita Hills. Not to say that it can't, but it certainly is grown in Los Alamos. It certainly is grown in Happy Canyon. It is certainly grown in Los Olivos. It probably could be, and I think at one point was grown in the Ballard Canyon as well. So Cinsault berries are interesting. They're the largest berries that I've ever seen in my life. Think of the largest table grape or the largest olive, and that's what you get. Because of that, these clusters are literally 3 to 5 pounds each. I took a picture last year of the cluster of Cinsault versus a cluster of Pinot. And it looked like Pinot was like a couple of berries that fell off the Cinsault cluster, really. So I make this wine with what I'm given. The berries are huge. You're not going to get a lot of structure in this wine. You're not going to get a lot of color in this wine. So kind of as Dusty was saying, you know, you have to respect the fruit you're working with. You have to respect the constraints of that and make the best wine you can with those constraints. I worked with this fruit when I worked at Fest Parker, but we would always bring it in and it would always be blended into a big red blend. It was never bottled on its own. In 15, I decided to make it on its own. And I love the delicateness of it. I've mentioned to you, Lamar, before that I call this my MTV Unplugged wine. You know, in the face and big and bold, this is my 22-year-old in a corner with a ukulele unmiked. And I think that, you know, it's kind of interesting to think about red wines in that respect, right? All the wines we're trying now tonight are really kind of acoustic versions, if you want to think about it. They're stripped down, not stripped down in flavor, not stripped down in interest, but stripped down a little bit in color, a little bit in structure, but they still offer so much. And when you strip them down, the purity of them comes through, the purity of the aromatics comes through. And that's, to me, that's incredibly exciting.
Yeah, I like the elegance that's happening here as well. I mean, it still has framework though. That's the one thing I want people to understand, that when you taste this wine, it's not it's not like it's loose. I'm sorry, I'm losing some. Can you guys hear me? Sorry about that.
Yep.
Larry, can I ask you where this wine's from?
It's from Camp 4. So for a long time, Camp 4 was the only vineyard that had Cinsault. Over the last, I would say half dozen years, there's a number more vineyards that have planted it. I think the oldest Cinsault in our area, actually, I now get is from Zaca Mesa. And I'll be releasing Zaca Mesa Cinsauts moving forward. And that's basically own-rooted Cabernet from the mid-70s that was grafted over to Cinsault in the mid-90s. But yeah, so this Cinsault was planted in the mid-90s. It crops heavy. Just because that's what the variety gives you. I bring the fruit in, I foot stomp these grapes. So this is 100% whole cluster, but because the berries are so big and there's so much juice, the stems make up such a minor amount of the entire must. So they don't really come across as anything to me other than a peppery quality in this wine, and also kind of a tea leaf quality that I get in whole cluster Pinots a lot.
Sorry, I was cutting out there, you guys. I was saying the fascinating thing about this wine is that you know, a lot of people think when they think lighter, they think that it lacks framework, it lacks kind of that angularity, and this has a lot of structure still. It's not loose. It doesn't have. I like you were saying that unplugged analogy. It's definitely a tight band. Like it's not like, you know, it needs to depend on the electricity and the full volume that some of these other varieties that, you know, you would normally see in that kind of like denser capacity. This definitely shows great framework, Larry. So would you, and quick question, would you consider the site has a lot to do with that as well, obviously because of climate, but is there anything that you can tell us about maybe the difference that you've seen in Cinsault throughout Santa Barbara as opposed to maybe this site?
Well, there hasn't been a lot planted in Santa Barbara, so there's not really a lot to compare with. The only thing I compare with is what I pulled from Zaca Mesa in 2020, but I don't look at 2020 as a normal vintage, so we'll have to wait and see how they play out. The vines, again, being older, the fruit is a little bit more concentrated at Zaca Mesa, but the challenge with Cinsault is it needs a lot of late harvest heat because the clusters are so darn big. The only place that I know that it gets really ripe is Lodi, where the Bechtold vineyard is at 135-year-old vines. But it is challenging. But yeah, I haven't seen, I don't have the knowledge yet. Up in Paso, I've had a Thatcher. There's a couple of people up there working with Cinsault, and there definitely is a lineage between my wine and their wine. To answer the question that Tom Hill asked, I did a carbonic Cinsault this year, Tom. I'm going to own the Cinsault market. I do a rosé, a red, and a carbonic. And I'm going to do a sparkling. I'm going to do a pet nat, and I'm going to do an orange one. I don't know. I'll figure it out. But no, I think it's a fascinating variety, and I just think that it has such beautifully elegant aromatics and wonderful texture. It's a great food wine. I don't expect Cinsault to ever take over. It is so light in color. And again, the berries are so big that a lot of winemakers just they shy away from it. They want to blend it with something to give it what it is. But like even my rosé, this is the rosé here. It does not have a lot of color, but that's okay. It is what it is.
Yeah. This is great. I like that we started with a little Cinsault, and we're gonna kind of transition a little bit as we kind of taste through some wines here. I think it'd be interesting to maybe talk with Dusty a little bit. What do you think, Dusty? Should we jump over and talk a little bit about Grenache for a bit?
Sure.
We're going from Cinsault to Grenache. Is there any comparison? Is there quite a bit of contrast? Let's see if we can do this transition here. I'd like to hear your
they're
thoughts.
both their own varieties. That's about where the comparison stop. Speaking to the size of the clusters, it's kind of funny, Larry. When I was in France a few years ago, I was out there with a vineyard manager, and they had planted some Cinsault, and he's like, "These vines are super young, and young for them is 10 years." And I swear I could not believe that they were even wine grapes. They look like plums. And yeah, and he's like, maybe in another 5 years we'll use it for rosé. But yeah, I mean the time frame over there is way different. But anyways, yeah. So moving on to Grenache. So the Grenache that I'm pouring it's a 2018 Spear Vineyards Grenache. It's northern corridor of the Santa Rita Hills. Which it's kind of funny. It actually faces into the southern corridor, even though the majority of the vineyard is the northern corridor. Super young vines. I think they were planted in 2013. Did I have that right, Larry? 2013, I think. Sandy soils. It's a little different than the majority of the Santa Rita Hills, where it's not diatomaceous. It's really sandy, and then it's on a kind of a shallow bed of limestone. But I don't know how much that limestone affects it. I think the sand and the weather affect it more than anything else. But being young, being in sand, it keeps it from developing a super robust Grenache. It tends to be big clusters again, relatively big berries. So you get a lighter expression. And I think that as winemakers, working with lighter reds is it's mentally taxing because it's a little bit more difficult. There's a lot more that can go wrong. Lighter wines tend to oxidize quicker, and Grenache is notorious for oxidizing. So we have to be super careful when we work with it. It can't take or handle any mistakes. This particular Grenache, again, I didn't mean to reference France so much, but going back to France, I was with a Rhone producer there, and they did about 100,000 cases a year, and they owned 36 barrels. They just didn't use barrels at all. They used anything but. So when I came back after working with them and seeing the expressions of their wines, I'm like, there are other vessels you can use besides 225 liter barriques. I mean, there's other stuff out there. So this particular Grenache, we did about a third in 2 oak barrels, and we did the rest of it in concrete tank.
Okay.
And we did a little bit in stainless as well, and then we blended them together. And each one of those élevage techniques kind of brought something to the table. And what's cool about a lighter variety or a lighter style is that those techniques kind of show through. They're not masked with the boldness. You can get them out of the wine if you're looking hard enough. You get the minerality. I mean, this Grenache is notoriously high in acid, but you could just see all the aspects of the wine very clearly. And what's fun is that it's super, all 3 of these wines, I've had them now open for about an hour, been kind of going back and forth between them all. And what's fun is that they're super versatile. And what Larry was talking about with big red wines, they're not really that versatile. They're kind of like birthday cake. They're made for one thing, and you take a few bites and it's really good, but then you're like, yeah, I'm kind of done with white birthday cake. Like, it's just too much. And it's kind of the same thing with big red wines. And with these, the versatility is awesome. Like, if you want to chill it down and you just want something for dinner, and I mean, my wine is 12.8% alcohol. I finish bottles regularly of it, and it's fine. It's no big deal as long as I have some food and stuff. And they're just easy to drink. However, going back to what we were talking about earlier, there is, if you have the desire to look in there, it's all there. It's all there. You just have to pay attention. And so the versatility is really cool. Like, it depends on what kind of mood you're in. You want just a thirst quenching drink and something for dinner? Good. My wine can do it. All 3 of these wines can do it. No problem. If you want something that's interesting and you can really ponder over a long period of time, boom, these wines all 3 of them can do it. And that's, you can't say that about a lot of big red wines. I mean, you just can't. And I mean, obviously, big red wines, syrahs and cabs have their place. We all make them. I don't think Larry makes a cab, but Jaffurs makes awesome syrahs, and they're big, gnarly wines. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But the versatility in these wines is actually really, really cool, and I dig it. I think it's fun. I think they're great for all occasions. I think all 3 of these wines are beautiful food wines. Don't overpower the meal, really accentuate the meal. Can go with all different kinds of food. I think that's a hallmark of a good wine, is to be versatile.
Yeah, I agree with you. And something that I think someone like Wes Hagen would agree, that, bringing people back to the table to eat and drink together, there has to be a conversation about wines that can uphold that entire conversation for the 2 to 3 hours that now we're at table again. And I love that. I love that concept of the food compatibility. I think that is kind of pointing back to everything that we talked about at the beginning with these lighter fare wines, lighter fare foods. Let's jump into food in just a bit. I want to talk about that. But one thing I wanted to note, that if people are watching and they're waiting to taste, so they want to taste along, or they haven't tasted or don't have these wines yet, there's something that so far in both of these wines, I'm sure with the third wine, there's something that I'm noticing, that it's again speaking to that sense of place, that thumbprint of Santa Barbara. Like, Camp 4 with Larry Cinsault, it definitely tastes like it has that kind of Garrigue quality. And same with Spear. I mean, I think if you've tasted Spear, anything from Spear, this definitely still has that thumbprint of Santa Rita Hills. And I do love that you were talking about like the 50% neutral French, talking about it's 100% concrete, but you did 50% stainless steel. You could still taste that sense of place, and I love that. That is also a check mark into a wine that I think should be drank for sure. I don't know how you guys do it to keep it like a snapshot of a picture of that place. It's almost like it's in the bottle. It's amazing.
Yeah, you just need to be respectful of the fruit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done there. I think that definitely
And don't
is.
get me wrong. I mean, the reason I did that was because I completely fucked up the 2016 with way too much oak. So I mean that there is a learning curve for me of why I'm like, I need to be delicate with this. I can't just ram and jam this like I do Cabernet and put it in New French oak and expect it to be awesome. I mean, there's got to be some technique and there's got to be some willingness to let the fruit shine through. And you know, it was a lesson. It was hard learned, but
Wow.
you know.
Well, 18 was also a challenging year for that vineyard. That was my first year getting fruit from that vineyard. One of the other things to mention about the Grenache rows, they're very short rows, but they're darn well steep.
Yeah.
In fact, the owner, I remember sampling with Ofer this last year, and I went down and came up, and he goes, "You didn't just go down, and you didn't go all the way." I'm like, "No, I went all the way down." He goes, "No, people don't do that around here. There's steep rows. I mean, and you know, the clusters in 18 were really interesting because they were, I think we're getting from the same, I think there's only, well, there's kind of 2 blocks side by side.
Yeah,
but,
same clone though, and then there's like a heavier clay area and a sandier area. But
Yeah.
the difference in ripeness from top to bottom is crazy too.
And as it should be, But I mean, you know, and I picked a little later than you, but, and I have 3 barrels that I bottled, but I have 4 more that are still in barrel from 18 to compare kind of barrel age versus bottle age, for the same reason that you said, "Oh my gosh, you know, I got to have less of a heavy hand." I'm learning this vineyard as well. I'm learning this, and it's a different type of Grenache. You know, I'm used to working with Larner Grenache, which I know we're going to try some from Stephen. I'm used to working with Thompson. I'm used to working with Camphor, Watch Hill. This is a very different take on it. That site in the Santa Rita Hills really leads to a more floral, lighter, more elegant style that I dig. I mean, it's the yin to the yang for me.
Yeah.
Sure.
I love it. I think that's a great segue too, Stephen. I would love to ask and chat with you a little bit about your Grenache, and maybe we could talk a little bit about the difference between, you know, obviously there's a big difference between Larner and with Spear Vineyards, but talk to me a little bit about your wine.
Yeah, of course. So this comes from it's actually from 2 vineyards. Larner makes up about 45%, and the balance is Stoltman Vineyard, which is also in Ballard Canyon. So it's labeled as a Santa Barbara County Grenache.
Nice.
We could designate it as Ballard Canyon.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, similar to what Dusty was talking about, how our goal with this is really to be true to the varietal and the fruit. And you know, Santa Barbara County is an elegant Grenache. For whatever reason, when I taste Grenache here, that's 100% varietal, they tend to be a little bit lighter in color, more floral, more pretty leaning in terms of like the aromatic profile. And for me, it's really important to embrace that in this wine. You can get plenty of extracted Grenache in Spain if you want to, or in the Southern Rhone where it's blended with Syrah and Mourvedre. But with this, we really like to embrace that more elegant style. For one, we make 6 different Syrahs, and those are all big wines. So it's nice to have something that sets itself apart from a lot of the other red wines that we make. And like, I mean, I feel like I'm kind of beating a dead horse here with the, you know, food thing, but this really is the most versatile food wine probably that we produce as well. I mean, you can put this on a dinner table and it'll go with almost anything. You can have, I mean, I might not serve it with white fish, but you could serve it with salmon or like a pepper tuna steak or pretty much any type of meat. So it's a great table wine. But yeah, so, you know, getting back to how we produce this, it's from Stoltman and Larner Vineyards. It's fermented with native yeast for about 2 weeks, roughly, pressed off at dryness, and then the final. It's fermented in small open top bins, about a ton each, with varying levels of whole cluster, and the final wine ends up being about 60% whole cluster. So there's a decent amount of stem inclusion in there. And I think that really comes out in the aromatics. You get the spice character from the stem, gives it some texture as well.
I was just going to ask you about that. There is like this spice. It's super familiar, but you definitely you just answered it about the like the 60% stem inclusion. I think that's beautiful. Are you separating your lots then? Obviously from Stoltman to Larner, and then and then blending
well,
them
at
together.
Stoltman, we have two different clones. So we're in two different.
Okay.
I mean, they're planted right next to each other, but we get Tobler's clone and Alban clone. And so we pick those separately, ferment them separately, and age them separately as well, and then Larner. So there's actually 3 different lots that we keep separate throughout the aging process, and then blend it before we bottle it. I mean, yeah, I think Grenache is it is a delicate varietal, and you have to kind of handle it that way. It doesn't get racked. Like Dusty said, also, it tends to oxidize. So I think it's really important to have a kind of a light hand with it. So it stays in barrel on its leaves. It never sees a pump until it's bottled. And then it doesn't get racked until I bottle it. And I like to bottle it a little bit on the earlier side. So it spends about 10 months in barrel before it gets bottled to kind of preserve that freshness.
Okay. And then last question, kind of just geeking out a little bit, because Stoltman's a little further north than Larner. Do you have similar challenges in terms of anything that maybe climate might have a play into between the two sites?
Say Stoltman does tend to bleach out a little bit more. So it comes in a little bit lighter, the skins are a little bit lighter. Grenache is a temperamental varietal. And I mean, I can compare it to Syrah because I work with Syrah a lot. Syrah, you can pull leaves, you can expose the fruit, and it gets tough, it gets dark, and it sort of likes that extra sunshine. Grenache doesn't. Grenache tends to, if it's too exposed, it tends to bleach out. So you lose color.
Right.
So it's really important for us to keep shading around the clusters on the vine. And we actually kind of bow the shoots out and then pull leaves through the tunnel and sort of tunnel it out. Which creates, because it's also, Grenache is a pretty tight, they're pretty big, tight clusters, and they can, if you have mildew issues, it can become a problem, or during humid years, it can become a problem. So that tunneling kind of promotes airflow through the vines, and then we leave the leaves on the outside to kind of protect the fruit so it doesn't bleach.
That's well said. I like that. And question for you and Dusty, I think, because I had just kind of a question about this. Is micro perforation things that you see in Grenache as a grape? Do you see like little dotted holes coming if it's being pressured or if it's being pushed to its limits? Do you see that ever, or is it something totally different? Do you know what I mean?
Are you talking about shatter?
No, just like as the grapes are starting to get maybe too warm or what have you, are you seeing that at times there are some expression where it starts to actually kind of like perforate on, like almost like a balloon poked full of holes? Do you ever see that in specifically in Ballard, in that area? Nothing like that?
Only when there's bees.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, no.
Okay, I was just wondering. It's something that we've been hearing about in the Rhone, and just like how sometimes there are perforations that happen, and I was like, wow, I wonder if that ever happens in Santa Barbara. So yet another reason to drink Santa Barbara. Not that it's a bad thing, but just a challenge that we hear about with Grenache specifically. Never heard that. Okay, good. Well,
it's when winemakers go into other people's blocks and they take it doesn't happen often. It really depends upon, the relation. Anyways, no.
Sabotage. You guys were talking about food making me absolutely hungry. And Stephen, I have to ask you, with this particular wine, by the way, this is killer. What is your favorite dish that maybe personally you would love to size up yourself with this particular wine?
One favorite dish. That's pretty.
or many dishes. Let's try to be a little
I think
more.
I think it's great with duck.
Yeah.
Like some kind of a berry sauce, but nothing too overwhelming or sweet.
Okay.
It'd be perfect. I mentioned it earlier, but I like it with like grilled salmon, like an oily grilled fish.
Okay.
It's really nice.
I like it. I like it. This is good. I could definitely see the duck there for
Also,
sure.
honestly, just like a charcuterie plate and some cheese, this is the perfect wine.
Why work hard? Just try to get something like with a little bit of spice, a little bit of fat. I love it. This is good. Dusty, let's talk about your wine and food pairing for a bit. You know, this one, I do taste that minerality in it, but is there something that maybe we should be aware of for pairing that might be?
No, like we talked about, it's super versatile. I mean, just tonight, going back to what Steven said, I had a farro bowl with salmon, a salmon farro bowl with spinach, and they had some little raisins in there, and it went beautifully. It went beautifully with this wine. I also like this wine with vodka sauce. For some reason, like a pink vodka sauce, it works really well with that too. And it also goes really well with pizza. Yeah.
I love it. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Larry, how do you top that? I mean, we got vodka sauce, little pasta, little pizza. We got some wild game. What do you got, Larry? What can we do with your Cinsault? What would you do?
So obviously a versatile food wine as well. I did a winemaker event with it was a kind of a Top Chef event, and it was paired with a spicy duck dish, which I think really went really well. The last time I paired it at a winemaker dinner was in December, a winemaker dinner I did that was called Jingle Balls. It was all ball related food. And this was paired with what the chef called Saul Rodriguez's matzo ball pozole. So it was fat matzo balls and a spicy pozole broth. But my answer to any question about food and wine is nachos. Everything goes with nachos. So this goes great with nachos as well. So we'll leave it at that.
I love it, and we've had some people. We've had a couple of guests on the Zoom, and then also on Facebook, talking a little bit about what they would love to see. And chicken wings has apparently been something that has come up. They're wondering if they can. What can they eat? What can they drink with chicken wings? Well, everyone, these wines would go great with chicken wings. Duck rillettes, maybe a little mushroom risotto. I like that. That sounds like down my alley. I would do anything. I like that Steven said that, like charcuterie and cheese, because that seems to be like a common thing that a lot of people can just really put together really easily. And if you want to fancy it up and get your duck rillettes or maybe a little terrine, lamb terrine or something, like, do that for sure. But this could really rock. You guys, all three of these wines I can see in my everyday life, like in everyday eating, everyday drinking. And I think that's kind of the point we wanted to make today, was that this is something that shouldn't be, overlooked for sure. Where do you guys see in the future of like Grenache, Cinsault, and some other lighter reds? Do you see maybe other varieties that you want to play with down the road that might fit into this family here? Dusty, what do you think?
I already do too many varieties, I think. I there's so many things I want to work with, but I kind of got to get all the horses lined up. Like it's, I just don't want to be scattershot everywhere. I really dig this Grenache. So this year I'll do 3 different takes on it. I'll do a red wine. I'll do a rosé, which we didn't do in 2020, but we did do in 2019, and it was fantastic. So I'll do a rosé, and I'm also going to do a Grenache rosé pet nat this year as well.
Beautiful.
So no new varieties as far as the lighter red wines. I mean, unless you want to lump Pinot Noir in there, but
right.
Yeah, just going to do a few different takes on this particular Grenache.
I like it. Steven, anything down the pipe works that we can get insider trading info on from you?
Well, the one we make a Mourvèdre from Thompson Vineyard. That's actually kind of a lighter styled red as well.
Nice.
We were using it in a blend for a long time. And we kind of beefed it up with Syrah and put a little Grenache in there for aromatics. But the last couple of years, it's been really nice. So we bottled just a straight Mourvèdre, but it's not a big Bandol style Mourvèdre. Similar to our Grenache, we're kind of embracing that lighter style with it. And it's really cool. It's not quite as fruitful and like floral as the Grenache, it's a little bit on the funkier side, but still a lighter body. And then for me personally, I don't work with it, but I think Gamay is another lighter styled red wine that I love.
Yeah,
that
that's a good.
I'd love to work with at some point in my career.
Yeah.
It's great. Larry, I know you've got some stuff down the pipe here. I mean, what do you got coming up?
Well, I mean, I do 100% Carignan, which is definitely darker than the Cinsault, but it comes in at about 12.5% alcohol as well. So it has a very different characteristic to either the Cinsault or the Grenaches that we tried tonight, but it is light. It's very, very food friendly. I do my Aberration, which is a stainless steel aged red that is generally a blend of Cinsault and Grenache. And then, as I said, I did my first carbonic wine this year, and I really did it for educational purposes more than anything else. I have so many people that come into my tasting room, and they'll say, "Gosh, you make a carbonic wine. Isn't that great?" And I'll say, "Well, do you know what a carbonic wine is?" And they have no clue whatsoever. So for me, it was fun to do it as a winemaker. To leave something alone for 5 weeks during harvest was ungodly difficult. But it was fascinating for the process, and my goal this coming year is to probably do 2 separate carbonics, 2 different varieties, and really see what they bring to the table. If they're the same, if the wines speak more of the process rather than the variety, I'll blend the 2. But if not, I'll end up with 2 interesting light red wines. I make wines that go anywhere from 10.5 to 16% alcohol, and I don't think that there's a sweet spot per se. I think there's a time and a place for every type of wine that's out there. And even the vineyards that we're working with, I mean, I work with Larner. I work with a similar clone, I believe, that Stephen does. And my Larner is definitely bigger and bolder than what he brings in. But that doesn't make it better or worse. It just makes it a different take on the variety from that site. And that's the beautiful thing about Santa Barbara County, is that we can express ourselves from the same site with the same clone, rows right next to each other, but have different ideas of what we're trying to achieve. And it's not that one is bigger or better than the other. It's that they're just different.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of these varieties. That's the beauty of Santa Barbara County Rhones to me. But there's I mean, I would love to work with Counois as well. I love these lighter red varieties. I think that they do offer a nice alternative to the Syrahs and to the other bigger, bolder reds that are out there.
Yeah, I agree. I love this. This is great. So we've got a couple of folks that have kind of chimed in. Susan has said that she loves Cinsault with Thai food. I can't agree more. Any kind of heat, these wines can hold up with a little bit of heat, whether it's that kind of like heat that we see in spicy foods, or even like ginger roll. If you hear people talking about different types of spice. And then someone here said, Nathaniel said loves Grenache with Indian food. So again, we have that spice element, tomatoes, lots of herbs, Middle Eastern style lamb that he makes. So I love that. Hopefully you can see yourself enjoying these wines with that dish. That sounds lovely, by the way, Nathaniel. I have a selfish question that I want to ask. Excuse me. Tasting these wines, kind of in this flight, if you will, it's interesting. You can pick up styles and personalities. And I wanted to know, do either of you, or have you guys have tasted any of these wines, or any wines like Cinsault or Grenache that you look up to from other Santa Barbara winemakers, that maybe you're not trying to compare, or like it's not like a cover song that you're trying to do that, but that you think about often, or that you draw inspiration from? Is there anyone that sticks out in Santa Barbara? Dusty?
Obviously Angela Osborne. I mean, it's kind of hard to talk about Grenache in Santa Barbara County without talking about Angela. I mean, those wines are fantastic, and she does so many of them. Good buddy of mine, Matt Dees, makes really good Grenache from Ballard Canyon. They tend to be a little bit bigger, though. They tend to be a little bit darker. But the inspiration for mine, as I mentioned earlier, definitely in respecting what the fruit is, came from France, came from the Rhone Valley. Seeing how they do it over there, and just kind of light bulb went off that, there's more than one way to skin a cat. You can make Grenache in multitude of ways and still have it come out really, really fantastic. And so that's kind of where the inspiration to make this style of wine came from for me, at least.
Any particular house in the Rhone?
Yeah, Chateau Saint Nabor, my namesake. Yeah, we originally met when they sued me over the name, and we came to an amicable resolution, and we wound up becoming really good friends. And they invited me over to work there for a summer. So yeah, a few years ago, I went over there and spent some time with them, and a lot at their winery, a lot at Chateau de Pop, a lot in the Northern Rhone, but mostly working with them and to see how they did things there and the differences between what we do here. And it was really eye-opening.
Wow, I love that. I love that you drew a lot of inspiration from that. And the great mention, Angela and Matt. I think those are amazing mentions for sure. Stephen, does anyone come to mind when you think about Grenache that you love, maybe that you would drink besides your own, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, so one, not just Grenache, but just, I mean, a general winemaker that I've looked up to for a long time, and whose Grenaches I've had and admired for a long time is Bob Lindquist and the Coupe Grenaches, and they're made in a really balanced style that I'm also trying to achieve with this wine, and very age worthy too. And I've had lots and lots of older wines from him, not just Grenache, but other varietals that really hold up, and it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, well said. I love that you brought up age. I wanted to ask a question about that later, but let's talk with Larry. Larry, anyone that comes to mind that you kind of look up to? I mean, we talk about Bob Lindquist. It's hard not to talk about Rhone Reds and not talk about Bob. But anyone that comes to mind for you?
Grenache, as I said, is such a versatile variety. I tend to like Grenaches that have a little more oomph to them. I've always been a fan of the Beckman Grenaches, regardless of who the winemaker is. That site is wonderful for Grenache. They're definitely on the bigger, bolder side, not the lighter side that we're trying tonight. Michael Seaway calls himself the #King of Grenache. Of course, I beat him twice in Grenache offs, but anyways, that's another story. And his wines are a totally different take on it. He definitely turns the volume up to about 14. They're the type of Grenaches that I want maybe a glass of, but probably not more. But aromatically, he achieves certain things with Grenache that are just mind-bogglingly beautiful. So, there's a lot of people that have worked with Grenache in our area for quite some time and do quite a nice job with it. It's just a matter of, what I'm in the mood for more than anything else.
Yeah, I totally I love that. Those are, again, all of these, at least, inspirations and these influences are solid for sure. The conversation about age came up a little bit because talking about wines in France and how a lot of people think that lighter reds do not age well, and we've known that not to be true with some of the Pinot Noirs and Burgundian style and some of the Gamay even. But for you guys, how have you responded to the age question about can these wines age? Where does that sit with you? Is it something you want them to age? Is it something you want them to enjoy now? Is it even a thought? I'll let anyone answer.
I mean, speaking for my wine and Jaffurs Grenache in general, they age really well.
Right.
I would say they can pretty much guarantee to go 10 years. And then past that, it's more of a roll of the dice and a little more vintage dependent. I will say that historically, the Jaffurs Grenaches have been a little bit heavier. That said, they've never been overblown. And they, in this grand scheme of things, they have been on the more delicate side, but maybe I've turned it down a little bit in the last couple of years. But I still expect them to age really well. I think, mentioning earlier how I don't rack the wine and bottle it a little bit earlier, so it's slightly more of a reductive style.
Yeah,
I think it's going to keep that ageability going. And speaking to that too, they transform. They really change a lot with bottle age. A lot more than Syrah and some other fuller bodied reds. After about 5 years, they really take on way different characteristics. They get a little more savory. There's a lot more tea components. They shed a lot of the tannins that they have early on, and really turn into very interesting different wines.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. That's great. We had a great comment from George about the harmony and the balance between some of the heavier wines and the lighter wines, and the analogy was about heavyweight boxers versus lightweight boxers. And I thought that was a really good comment there. You know, the whole thing about high energy and complexity and finesse, and obviously, you know, there is a quickness, there is a complexity here and high energy for sure on these wines that I appreciate. Great comment, George. I love that. And I'm excited, you guys. These are amazing wines. Thank you so much for sharing these. I honestly, when I started tasting Grenache from California, I think, you know, we talk about Bob Lindquist a lot, but you know, talk about lighter red wines, red Rhone specifically. It's really something we don't see enough of, and I would love to see more of that. I know we had a couple comments on here. There was a question that was asked about Mourvedre, single varietal Mourvedre, and Jennifer had asked, you know, I'd love to see more of that. And I know Stephen, you talked about that, and Larry talked about that. So it sounds like people are wanting more of these styles of lighter reds. And the question that's kind of a Columbo question, but are you guys seeing obviously a greater interest in this lighter style every day? Is it something that you see, you know, a lot more on a daily basis, or is it something that's like hit and miss? Obviously you're making a pet nat, Dusty, so there's got to be a demand there for some folks.
Oh no,
what are your
around here? I have no idea if it'll sell. I have no clue. I just think it'd be super fun to do. And I tried to make some this year, but it was way too explosive, and I just had to pop the bottle and let it go. So I'm giving it another go.
I think it goes with the hair, Dusty.
Yeah.
That is going to be you, my friend. You're going to own that.
This time I'm going to
Let it go,
bottle it
man.
way
Let it
lower
go.
bricks.
You know, I definitely see more acceptance of lighter red wines for sure. When I pour my lineup of wines, it has a place, right? And
yeah,
I do need to kind of I need to set the scene a little bit for the wine, in all honesty, a lot more so than I have to do with other varieties. But to me, there's definitely a place, and I'm definitely seeing more and more people moving towards accepting these style of wines. You know, it's interesting. I had a steakhouse not too long ago that wanted to bring in this wine by my Cinsault by the glass. And I'm like, no. And like, why not? I said, well, look at your list. You've got syrahs, you've got cabs. You're going to put this on the list and you love it. And that's great. But you can't hand sell a couple of cases. And what's going to happen after, you know, it's definitely it's a more challenging sell. You do need to have people come to you, like I said, a little bit more so than other wines. In terms of ageability, I mean, so much of that comes down to the style that the wine is made in. Like Stephen, I don't rack my wines at all. And unlike Stephen, I mean, I do have wines that will spend 3, even up to 4 years in older oak, never racked. And for the exact same reason he mentioned, they stay tighter longer. And even with Grenache, which tends to has this reputation of being oxidative, I don't find my Grenaches to get very oxidative as long as the pH is low enough to avoid that. But, you know, I think Grenache is a variety that can age unbelievably beautifully. I mean, it's been shown over in the Rhone. It's going to take on different characteristics for sure. But it certainly can age, and it can create new layers. Cinsault, I don't know. I mean, I've only started making Cinsault in 15. So this is only my 3rd release. It would be disingenuous for me to tell people to lay it down for 20 years because I haven't made it for 20 years. So I don't know. But it is a wine that I'm excited about seeing where it goes, for sure.
Yeah, I think people are curious. I mean, we brought up some sommeliers from LA this last weekend, and, you know, toured around Santa Rita Hills, and they were all asking about Grenache, and they're all asking about who else is growing lighter reds. And so there is, I mean, for trade and for industry, we do, obviously you guys know that, but there is a concerted effort for people to slow down and try to explain, like Larry setting the stage a little bit for these lighter reds. So I'm hoping the more we educate and the more that we continue to like show these wines with different foods, different fare, it'll really open up some curiosity. I can't not drink a white and a red when I'm having like spicy Thai food. People look at me like I'm crazy. And they're like, why are you drinking red wine with spicy food? I'm like, you need to try it. Like lower alcohol red wine. Like there's some like lighter complexities that are amazing. And obviously people miss out on stuff like that. So I'm excited, you guys. You know, we have a couple minutes left, and I love Larry's conversation. Like I'm a big music guy, and I really do like the whole conversation about wines that represent, you know, kind of the frequency in which we like surround ourselves in music. And I'd love that unplugged conversation. Larry, if this was an unplugged, if your wine was an unplugged artist, do you have that artist in mind that you would akin to this?
Without a doubt. This is Elvis Costello singing Red Shoes, unplugged, just his guitar. No Steve Naive on the piano, just him.
Yep. 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 I could see that. That's great. I love that little Elvis Costello. I like that a lot. Dusty, I have to ask you, I mean, when you make your wine, do you play music to it? Do you sing to it? Is there any kind of song that comes to mind when you're making this Grenache?
No, but I will say this. My favorite Sirius channel just turned over to Yacht Rock for the summer. And this is like perfect Yacht Rock wine.
Rushable. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
I love it. Just Sirius XM radio, Yacht Rock.
Yep.
Shameless plug there with this 2018 Grenache. I agree with you 100%. Stephen, we can't leave you out. I mean, if there was some sort of a musical influence here, what would you say it would be here on the 2018 Grenache you got?
That's a good question. I will say you won't come by Jaffurs and not hear music very often. But I wouldn't say that there's a particular style of music nor artist that inspires the Grenache.
I was just thinking the two vineyards. Is it like Simon Garfunkel? You know,
I think it's kind of a sultry wine to me, you know, and like so maybe like a Billie Holiday wine.
Ooh, oh, we're going old school. I like that.
Or Amy Winehouse if you want to be a little more modern.
Okay, Amy Winehouse. I'm into it. Absolutely. I like that. Well said. It's got some classic like kind of style to it. It's got some nostalgia. So I'm in there. Well, you guys, I think you guys nailed this. And these three wines are obviously killer wines. We're gonna be trying these with some food here later tonight and tomorrow. I'm gonna try them in the next 2 or 3 days just to see how they work and how well they do. I wanted to thank everybody that has jumped on to the Facebook Live as well as Zoom here, and couple comments real quick before we land the plane. This is good. So Susan says that she always looks for different wines on any tasting list, takes a chance and might find something unusual. And that's how she found Cinsault years ago. So I love that curiosity. Keep that up. That sounds like something we would do. Any final comments, you guys, before we sign off, Larry?
Yeah, I just want to say that we're trying to do this on a monthly basis at this point from the Santa Barbara chapter. So Santa Barbara County chapter will hold our next one on bright whites, and that'll be about a month from now. So look for the announcement from the Rhone Rangers. We'll be featuring Claret Blanche and Viognier. So two very interesting varieties that do very well in Santa Barbara County. And thank everyone for joining us tonight. We truly, honestly appreciate it. And thank you for supporting Santa Barbara County Rhones.
Thanks, you guys. And real quick plug to, before we sign off, the Rhone Rangers has a ton of educational material too. We were talking about trying to educate more people and learning more about these lighter fare reds. But if you want to, I would definitely recommend highly going to www.rhoneranger.com rhonerangers.org. Check out the educational materials. They have some great stuff there, some database of wineries that are members. And obviously the events that Larry is speaking to, you'll be able to stay abreast as to when those are happening. So if you need to shout out to them, info@rhonerangers.org. If you want to shoot an email, you can do that at info@rhonerangers.org. But you guys, thank you. Stephen from Jaffurs, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Dusty Nabor from Nabor Wines, thank you. And
Thank
Larry
you.
Schaffer from Tercero Wines, you guys, thank you so much. And to all of our friends that were able to join. Appreciate it. Thanks, you guys. Stay safe. So
Thank you, Lamar.
Cheers.
thanks, you guys.
Cheers.